Bigger, better, bolder. The cold, hard truth is taking talk to the next level. Right here on Bobo 89.1 FM, Cayman's Community Radio. We are still spilling the tea and committed to being part of the change that Cayman so desperately needs. Join Sandy Hill weekdays from 7:30 a.m. for Premier Access, Cayman Voices, Truthful Thursdays, and much more. Cayman's #1 talk show is now bigger, better, bolder, and more than talk. Getting results with hot topics, consumer reports, court exposés, and more.
I've come to set the record straight. I've come to shine the light on you. Let me introduce myself. I am the cold, hard truth.
Now, from the CMR studio in Grand Cayman, live, direct, it's the cold, hard truth. Now, join the conversation on 345-936-2626.
That number again is
345-936-2626.
Recover Personal Injury Attorneys, helping injured people get what they deserve. Did you know that insurance companies have lawyers that represent their interests? Before signing and accepting any settlement, know your rights. Call us today for a free consultation at 924-9999. That's 924-9999. Recover. Your personal injury attorneys are on standby to assist.
Great news, K-Man! Tim Hortons is finally open and ready to serve you. Start your day right with our delicious all-day breakfast or grab a box of our famous Timbits and a dozen donuts for a sweet treat. Need a quick pick-me-up? Swing by our drive-thru for your favorite espresso drink anytime. We're open weekdays from 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. on the weekends, closing 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, with 2 entrances at the Shamrock Road Roundabout in Red Bay. It's time for Tim's.
Cayman Voices was a dream that I had for several years now. It's about taking the power of storytelling to embrace our own collective history as a people. Through our individual stories, we're able to see the common thread that binds us together as one. One person's personal journey has become our collective culture, heritage, and history. This series will show people from all walks of life sitting down with me as the host and going through their life journey. Sometimes there are unknown elements of their lives, but ultimately we're going to walk away having learned something new with every person that we sit down with. I guess I would explain it as an exploration of our story. I'm naturally curious about people and their lives. So Cayman Voices is exciting and allows me to capture this for everyone to enjoy. We are seeking out Caymanians, multi-generational, as well as some who have moved here to, uproot their entire lives and to make this their home. This dream would not be possible without some sponsorship, and so I'd like to thank the DART organization for stepping up to the plate to ensure that we're able to deliver regular monthly content for our viewers to enjoy. So sit back, kick up your feet, turn up the radio, relax, and listen to Cayman Voices. All right, so I am so tickled pink to be here in Cayman Brat, the one and only. Such a beautiful island. We've got Miss Valda Scott here. We're going to sit down. This is actually my first BRAC interview, believe it or not, for this series, Cayman Voices. So I feel very privileged to have you be my inaugural interview. So, Ms. Valda, how old are you? Tell me how old you are.
I am 85 years old, the 26th of February gone.
Wow. Well, I must tell you, you look amazing.
Thank you.
And you are up and about. I was here last couple of days in the BRAC, and you still driving?
Yes, ma'am.
She's grocery shopping.
Yes, ma'am.
Doing everything, cooking.
Yes, ma'am. Still cooking. And
Wow.
the kids there on me and saying, Mom, it's time for you now to put those pots down. See, I even have my business license right up over my door. So it not say it is something that I'm doing and I'm not doing it with
You're
the
doing
right
it properly.
procedure. Yes, ma'am.
But you enjoy it, obviously.
Exactly. I've been doing it from time I can remember that my grandmother used to put, what we call the little benches, which I got one into my kitchen where my husband made for me years before his passing. And I can remember clearly my grandmother putting me up on one of them to stand up and watch her by what we call the caboose and learning me from scratch to make breads, to make the heavy cake, to cook the coconut then on the caboose, and everything. It all started from there.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, let's go all the way back. So you're originally a BRACer.
I'm originally a Cayman BRACer.
Yes. And your mom, both your parents are from Cayman BRAC as well?
Both my parents, my mom and my dad, both are BRACers.
Wow. What about your grandparents?
Well, as far as I know, my grandmother, she actually was original from Grand Cayman and Gun Bay.
Okay.
And my great grandfather, as far as I know, he was from some of those other faraway cities. He was a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes, but I really do not know him.
Okay.
But I was actually raised by my grandmother.
Oh, really?
Yes,
okay.
I was raised by my grandmother.
By your grandmother.
Yes.
Okay. So at some point she moved to Cayman BRAC.
Yes.
Okay.
And some point she moved to the BRAC.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes.
And this area, this is Spots Bay?
Yes, they actually call it Blue Pine, but I original from further down the road where we would call the Bogasan area, just up above there where the old agriculture ground, agriculture office, down the area there. Yes, I was original from up there.
Okay.
But my grandmother's house, I can remember clearly, was just across on the Surma side from the Smart Bay School right down the road.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
And what was it like in those days growing up with her?
It was hard growing up. I can remember getting up all 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with her and use what we call the ladder and going on the bluff with her. She used to have the ground on the bluff and going up there with her and getting the cassava, the potato, the yam and whatever from the ground and come off. And after that, I had to go.
So wait a minute. There was no road back in those days to go to the bluff?
No. It's a bluff road down as you're going down around the turn, but just before you get to the pink store down there, the upholstery place, it's a bluff road right on this and that we walk up there. We used to walk up there in those days.
And you needed a ladder to help you?
No, we used to use a ladder, a Garcia ladder, and
the lantern.
And we light that and hold that in our hand, and we walk up there.
Because it was still so dark at early in the morning.
Yes, because I had to get back home, go and dip water from the old time wells for another neighbor. and then had to get back home to my grandmother and get ready and go to school.
Wow.
Yes, and my teacher was Teacher Hill, and that was the principal for the school, right where the old agriculture office down there. That was the schoolhouse. And my principal was Teacher Hill.
Right.
And then it was another teacher with him, which was Doris McLaughlin.
I see.
Yes.
So you were expected. How old would you have been that you can remember having to do?
I would say I was about 8 and 9 years old, and I actually stayed with my grandmother because, like I said, she raised me. I did not even know my dad until when I had my 4th child.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, my dad left my mom and he went to Jamaica. And one trip when I had my 4th child, my husband was running in and out to Jamaica. And I went to Jamaica to be with him for a couple of weeks. And I took my 4th child with me. And my sister-in-law went out one day and she came home and she said, your dad want to see you.
Oh, wow.
I said,
who is he?
I said, my dad. I said, I don't know who he is.
Yes.
She said, well, I'm telling you, it's your dad.
Whoa. That must have been a shock.
It was a shock. And
is he from Jamaica?
He actually from Cayman Brack. I refused from seeing him because I did not know where.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not know him. Because with all of my growing up, my mom and my grandmother told me that he had left and went to Jamaica when I was 2 years old. So actually, she pleaded with me, my sister-in-law pleaded with me and said, well, you need to see your father. I said, if he say he's my father, I said, well, I'll have to accept it. So she made arrangement with him and he came to the house and he broke down and he started to cry. And he said that he was my dad. I said, well, I do not know you. He said, I am your dad. He started to say, well, he was sorry and whatever. I said, okay. I said, if you say you're my dad, I say, I will have to accept it and I forgive you. And from then on, we made it good.
Did he ever move back to Cayman?
Yes, he moved back to Cayman Brack with his second wife and kids.
Okay, wow.
And he was here for a long period of time, and then he went on to Grand Caymans, and he was there for a couple of years, and he moved into New York. Him and his wife and kids. And until his passing, we remained a good relationship.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to let these things go.
Yes, well, I as years went on, I didn't see where, or I did not feel where I could let it go. But then as I said, it do not make sense, whole and malice, and
yes.
And
yes, well, that is quite an interesting story. But Miss Valda, in so many ways, it's not all that unique, because I met a lot of people. John Douglas said he didn't know who his mother was. I think he had Black connections too.
Probably.
And he said, aunts raised them back in those days, grandmothers. They always had someone to step in.
Yes.
Which was a blessing,
Yes, and I had a good grandmother, and then it came down to the time that I ended up then when she got to where that she needed help. I took her into my house.
Beautiful.
And I took care of her until her passing. When she passed away in my home.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so I was grateful for that.
Yes, absolutely. So were you the only one then that she was raising at the time? Or
No, she had another grandson, which is still alive in Grand Cayman, Tracy. that Muslim used to hang out by the waterfront, but I am made to understand now he's blind.
Okay.
But she also raised him, so
Yes.
and even Carmen Macfield have to call me Ada.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Carmen Dada was my brother.
But wait a minute now. That means that you're family to the Macfields.
I am not family to the Macfield, but my brother was married to Mavis.
Okay.
Yes, so Carmen Macfield have to call me.
Yes. Because on my mother's side, I'm family to all the Macfields, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Boy, Cayman is so small. There's all 3 islands.
yes, exactly.
Everybody's connected in some kind of way.
Exactly.
Yeah, so amazing. So you talked about in those early days, life not being easy, having to get up so early and go. Your grandmother had a little farm area. That's how you got food. Did you live by the sea a lot? Like, was most of the meat?
No, I actually did not live close by the sea, but I would leave and I would go along the bay and I would pick wilks and all of those things, and so and then my brothers and them, that was around the area, they would go fishing and all like that. And then my brother that was married to Carmen mom, he actually used to go to sea with National Bulk. So so we all had a good relationship. Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
And what other memories do you remember in the earlier years? You said that she used to teach you pretty much to do anything in the kitchen.
Anything, washing and everything. And I married at the age when I was 17.
Yeah.
Yes, and I had 6 girls and 1 boy.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
Yes.
Yes. What's your favorite dish to cook even now?
Oh, Miss Sandra, believe you me, I cannot explain to tell you what is my favorite dish to cook, because I enjoy cooking
everything.
Wow. I enjoy cooking everything. Every time that I see people, you make such a good rice and bean. You make such a good coconut rundown. You make such a good turtle stew. Some people say, well, they was not a person eat wilks, but the way I cook my wilks, they love eating my wilks. So I am a person, Miss Sandra, I just love cooking.
Yeah. Yes.
I just enjoy cooking.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that some people, I hear them talking about custard top cornbread. It's nothing like a custard top cornbread. What they call a custard top cornbread, Miss Sandra, it's what I know from scratch is a cornmeal custard. A cornbread made different from that.
Oh, yeah?
I'm telling you.
Wow.
A cornbread make different from a cornmeal custard. Because with a cornmeal custard, you mix that you would say it's low on water. And when you put that in the caboose or you put it in the oven, you wait for a couple of minutes or half an hour. You take a spoon, you stir it. That flavor is coming on the top and forming the custard. A cornbread is made different. You use a certain amount of cornmeal. You use a certain amount of flour. You get your coconut milk. You get your nutmeg, your cinnamon. Your vanilla, your egg if you want to put egg in it, and you get your baking powder goes into a cornbread. Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
So when I hear them talking about custard top cornbread, I say, where that come in?
Yes, that's interesting.
Yes.
Oh, you're going to have to make it one day and show us how it's really done properly.
Yes, I got the cornmeal dinner on my table tomorrow evening. I have to make a small cornbread for somebody.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
The cornbread make different from what this is a custard top cornbread. Yes.
Boy, things have changed, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And even some people, the way they make, you'll hear them say a cassava stretcher, but yet when they make it, it is hard. For this reason, it come out hard because in some people, when they grate the cassava, they squeeze it, they put the water down, they throw away the water, and then they put the starch back in the cassava. No, when I grate my cassava, I leave it just like that. All I put into that, I boil my coconut milk down with my ingredient into it, and I mix everything together. Therefore, when it cooks, it is a cassava stretcher.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So we've lost a little bit of the authentic ways of doing these recipes.
Exactly. But
Yes.
with my cooking, my baking,
Yes.
I do it from the old time way, and then I don't get a measuring cup and measure one thing.
Wow.
I do not
You just
measure.
know how much to put in.
Everything is into my head.
Oh my goodness.
I
Wow.
don't measure anything, Miss Andrea.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yes,
I have to measure everything. I gotta be honest. I can't remember half the time. I gotta take out my little notes.
No, ma'am. I just
No, you just put it in.
I just
Wow.
go right ahead.
I might have to come spend a whole week with you to see these different recipes because
Exactly.
we're losing all of this, unfortunately.
Exactly. I had to say, who got to pick it up? Not even my kids. They told me plain, no, mom, we are not doing it. No, mom, they say we are not doing it.
Yeah, because it's a lot of work. All this cooking is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work,
Yeah.
Miss Andrea.
Yeah, that's why if you don't love it, you're not gonna really do
You
it that
really
much.
cannot do it.
Yeah.
You definitely have to love what you're
Yes.
doing, to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's just so amazing. Wow.
Yes.
How old did your grandmother live to be?
My grandmother, when she passed away, she was close into her 90s.
Wow.
Yes.
That's such a blessing.
Yes. She was
Yes.
close into her 90s.
Wow. And what was her name?
Her name was Brunetta Barden.
She was a Baden. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Did you have, you're talking about going to school and stuff like that. And of course, in those days, we know even the school system was a little bit different. Did they have the high school here in the Block at the time?
No, ma'am. It
No.
was no high school.
Wow.
It was no high school.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you would have finished at probably 13?
Yes. I came out of what we call the primary school at the age of close 14. Yeah.
Yes. And then at that age, what would there have been for young girls to do here in Cayman Brac?
Well, at that age, and even at that time, you had to be 7 years old to go in.
Okay.
So at that time, it wasn't anything. You would say, well, it wasn't no work or anything here for the young people,
Yes.
to do.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So most of them at my age, they picked up themselves if they had people in United States, which I could have gone on to England. I had an uncle in England, but my grandmother said no, she would not let me go. So I just had to stay put, and that was it. And then, I would go around, working, with other different people. And then when I got up to where, then like I say, I married at the age of 17. And then at that time, I got work as a ways. I was a cook at the Buccaneer Inn.
Okay.
I was a kitchen helper at the Tiara Beach and the Old First.
Okay.
The Old First rest home
Yes.
that Mr. George Walton got down there now at Stake Bay at his rental home. I also worked there. I used to go there 7 o'clock in the morning and come off 2 o'clock, get ready and go to Tiara Beach till all 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night.
Wow.
So I was an all-in-round person.
Yes.
Yes. And then it was Elder Meyer, which was Mr. Bennett Elder Meyer, that was family to the Kent Elder Meyers. Well, at that time I was married, had all of my kids up, and he was up in Tampa, but they was bringing him back out and was looking for a caretaker for him. He came out and he brought a nurse from the VA hospital with him and put me to a training for a quadriplegic. So I took the training in 3 days. I qualified with that.
Wow.
And I got the job, and I've been with him for 7.5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I was an all-in-round person.
Whatever it took.
Yeah, whatever it took, my hand was into it. Yes.
And did your husband go off to sea at all?
Yes, he was a seaman. He was a seaman with most of my days with working out. He was at sea with National Bulgaria, with Fairfield, and all of those. Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
He went to sea when he was the age of 14. He started going to the Southern Reef with a man you might hear about, Mr. Ballinger Christian. He started going out to the Keys, Southern Reef Keys, at the age of 14.
Yes. So in those days, there was you see young people now, they can go all up in their 20s and 30s. They not got no job. They say they're not got nothing to do. In those days, that wasn't a problem. You better get to work.
Exactly.
You had to find something to do.
Yes, it wasn't no resume this and to get a job. No, it was nothing like that. There was no admin building or nothing like that. You know, it was like a little place, and they would have some government official in it, like Mr. Ashton Rudd and all like the name, you know. Yes.
Wow.
And we had to walk
everywhere.
From Spot Bay to Stake Bay. You get up 4:00 morning. If you was working for somebody, Stake Bay, you had to walk and go there 4:00 in the morning. And you was lucky enough if they had somewhere that they would let you stay for the week. If not, you had to walk back home in night.
Every single day. Whoa.
Yes.
Okay.
But we had it to do, and we did not complain like some of them now. If they don't get office job, that's it.
Do you remember the first car on Cayman Brac?
No, ma'am. I sure don't.
No. Okay. Yeah.
But I heard someone say that the first car that was on the Brac, it was either Mr. Ashton Rodder or someone further down the west end that had called Mr. Nat. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting. Now, you're a very vocal person. Even at your age, I remember the first time I heard you call in on my show, I said, but this woman sounds like she's in her 40s. She got a lot of energy. So tell us how you have remained, so active and so vocal, and you care about your community, and you don't want to see life in Cayman Brac change too much.
No, ma'am, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all, Miss Sandra. I even spent 20 odd years of my life in Little Caymans.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am. My husband went over to Little Caymans to work, and I would go down on weekend to visit him. And it ended up then when I went there, it was an old lady there by the name of Miss Rilla Ebanks. She was original from Cayman Brac, just right across here. And she was down there staying. She was married to a guy from Little Cayman by the name of Mr. Jack Ebanks, which was Mr. Guy Ebanks' brother.
Okay.
So I ended up then staying with them, and it was a man from United States that was building a house there, and he wanted her to take on the role of cooking for his workers. So she told him, she said, only how I could do it if Valda decided to stay and help me. So I was like hitching, hauling, pulling. I say, okay. I will stay. So I stayed there then, and I helped her, stayed with her for a couple of months and working there with her, cooking meals. And at the time, the lady from Pirate Pint was looking at housekeeping. And when she came to the house, she said, well, she was told to come and ask me by Mr. Roger Scott, because she was going to apply for somebody to come in from the States to do it. But Mr. Roger Scott, which was head immigration officer, told her, no, Miss Valda was Little Caymans. Go and ask her if she want the job. If she want the job, we are not giving you a permit for somebody to bring in.
Right.
So she asked me, and I to accept the job, and I went to Pirate Pint. I was there 17 and a half years as housekeeper and cleaning room and doing laundry. 17 and a half years.
Oh my goodness.
And the year then it was Paloma that we were closing down in August. I gave her notice, then I was leaving. She said, why? I said, because I have a bad knee and I'm going off to Grand for a knee replacement. And
But Paloma, that wasn't just a couple years ago.
yes, so I am not coming back then to work. She said no. She said, go ahead and do your surgery, and when we open back up in October, you come back to work. I said no.
You were ready to retire from that.
I was ready to retire from that. I even built a house in Little Caymans.
Okay.
Yes, because at that time I was working Pirate Pint. I was working for Captain Charles Connell, taking care of his apartment. And my husband was maintenance, taking care of his yard. So we were there. So when I retired then from Pirate Pint, I went on to the Pirate Pint, then closed down then in August for renovation, and I left, went on to Grand, had my knee surgery. When I was up and going, I came back to the Brack, and I'm here ever since. And 3 years ago I sold my home in Little.
Okay.
Yes, after my husband passed, then I said, I'm not going back there. So I would keep the house then for the kids. They said, no, Mama, we are not going there. So
have you ever lived in Grand Cayman?
No, ma'am. I don't like that. They're too fast going for me, Miss Andrea. No.
That's too fast.
No. Now, Miss Sandra, if I go to Grand, I'll go the morning, back the evening.
That's it. That's enough for you.
That's enough for me.
Good morning, Cayman. So I was giving you guys, as well as our esteemed guest, Dr. Carlos, a little snippet of our inaugural Cayman Brack interview. This is the first Cayman Bracker that we have done. And I saw, I think it was Abby mentioning earlier how much she loves listening to these interviews to hear that authentic Caymanian accent. And that's probably Dr. Carlos's first time I'm hearing it. So I'm so glad we're going to be introducing him here in just a second. But she was such a joy to interview, and I'm going to play the rest of the interview a little bit later on. But wow, I thoroughly enjoyed interviewing Ms. Valda Scott, 85 years young, and she is just so full of energy and so vibrant. And it was absolutely my pleasure to have the opportunity to sit down with her when I was in the Brack in May. So I tell you what, I am going to be making more frequent trips to the Brack so that I can speak to, because I think most of you guys would know this, we have our aging population there in Cayman Brack. A lot of seniors live there, and a lot of people from Grand Cayman actually retire in Cayman Brack. That's their retirement home. As she said, they don't like the hustle and the bustle of the big island. So, they enjoy not seeing traffic. And it's difficult to envision a place where you can still go and there is literally no traffic on the roadway. You can go from one end to the next. And if you're lucky, if it's 5 o'clock and that's the 5 o'clock rush, you may see 5 cars. It is, I was reminded when I was there, oh my gosh, how incredibly relaxing it can be just for that fact alone. But we'll continue her interview a little bit later on. But now we want to take some time to introduce Dr. Carlos Garcia. So first of all, I'm absolutely tickled pink to have Dr. Carlos Garcia. He's based at the Tampa Counseling and Wellness Center there in Tampa. And I'm so glad to have him here. He's a distinguished clinical psychologist. And, he is phenomenal from what I've heard. This is going to be our first interaction on a show. But my sources say he brings a lot of compassion, strength-based approach to counseling, helping individuals navigate the many challenges that we all face, including anxiety, depression, PTSD, grief, life transitions, and relationship struggles. His counseling center, Tampa Counseling and Wellness, prides itself on offering a warm, empowering space where people can take courageous steps forward towards healing and growth. And Dr. Garcia is at the heart of that mission. With an impressive background in psychological assessments, evidence-based therapies, and holistic mental health support, including accelerated resolution for trauma, faith-based counseling, and adolescent therapy, he's dedicated to guiding clients toward meaningful, positive change. So folks, whether you're facing life's hurdles or seeking deeper self-understanding, Dr. Garcia works collaboratively with each individual to bring about healing of the past, building confidence, and creating a brighter future. So please join me with all of your virtual comments and hands this morning and welcoming Dr. Carlos Garcia. Good morning.
Hello, my friend. I am tickled pink to be here with you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Of course, we are very, very happy to have you here. Now, I wonder if you could increase your volume for me just a little bit.
Sure.
How's that? A little bit soft.
Better?
Yes, I think that's much better. We want to hear you nice and loud and clear.
Yeah.
We've got listeners, folks, on Bobo 103.1 FM. And we also have, our online folks listening to this program as well. So good audience already, over 300 people. So let's, again, welcome Dr. Garcia. So Dr. Garcia, as I was thinking about you coming on this morning, I was putting my mind to so many things. I know you're contemplating potentially doing a show on our new CMR TV platform. We're excited if you do it for sure. And one of the things I was thinking about, this has got to be a show topic. So just write this down for now. You certainly don't have to address it this morning. But yesterday we had a video here in Cayman going viral. It's a family dispute, and we're a small island nation. And so in many respects, we're like one big dysfunctional family. And I always tell people here on this program that this program in and of itself is one big family because it's a lot of the same people every morning tuning in. We get to know a little bit about the character traits of our, participants or viewers. Some are extremely sensitive. They have very big opinions, but then they may not want anybody responding to them. And so we've learned to navigate somewhat. Some of the people on the program, sometimes it gets a little heated. I'm a very passionate person. So I'm the kind of person that can tell you off in 1 second. And then in the next minute, I'm like, let's just keep it going. Let's move on. I don't often hold grudges. It takes a lot for me to hold on to something. And so, I'm like, let's just keep it moving. But we had an incident yesterday, and I'll just give you a little bit of the background. Because, of course, folks, Dr. Carlos' show will be like a phone-based show where you could call in if he decides to do it and ask him questions. So here's the scenario. We have, of course, complications, right? I would say the most complicated relationship that any of us will navigate in life is parent and child. Am I right?
Yeah.
Even more complicated than a spouse, because you can choose a spouse.
Yeah.
You can't choose your parents. Right?
Oh,
so that's like,
yeah.
ugh. Yeah. All right. So parent and child. She's accusing him allegedly of creating arson. He was arrested. Somebody, torched her vehicle, which was horrible. And the mother seems to think that it was her son that did it. So he responded after he was released from police custody. He hasn't been charged yet, folks. He's only been arrested. And he did a live stream where he said, listen, he didn't do this. He's like, this is ridiculous. I was at home at 2-something in the morning, sleeping in my bed. I've got evidence. But then he starts to talk about why she would even think that he's capable of this. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, he kind of threw her under the bus, like talked about her history and what a bad parent she was, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
So just make a little note, because I think a lot of us here on this island suffer from generational trauma. It's tough. I mean, me, myself, we suffer from generational trauma. I think the problem is many of us don't recognize that we're suffering from generational trauma.
Right.
So that has to be a show topic. I mean, I know it can be more than one show,
yeah.
But I think that at some point we've got to address how our history of growing up in certain dysfunctional and chaotic households mm-hmm. has an imprint on us that can be everlasting, and not just on us, but if it was traumatic enough, it has an imprint on future generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, beautifully said. There's such a powerful quote out there, if anyone's heard it. If you don't heal your wounds, you're going to bleed on people that didn't cut you.
Oh, my God.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, that's one of the reasons I became a psychologist was I went to therapy to do my own work to understand how I was bleeding on people in my life that hadn't cut me. This was resulting from, the sort of environments and things that I grew up in, Sandra.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways that I sort of help people understand how these early environments can impact us is through a little story. And here's a little story of a little boy or a little girl going out to eat with their parents. They go out to eat every Friday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on this particular Friday, the parents tell this small child, like, we're going to let you choose what you want to eat today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the kid gets all excited and says, yes, finally, some adult decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Gets to the restaurant, opens the menu, and the child sees this big, delicious, cheesy pizza, Sandra. And the child says, I want the pizza. And right in that moment, mom checks in and she's like, honey, are you sure? You always get the burger.
Mm-hmm.
So the child stops and thinks about it for a moment. Oh, that's true. But she sticks to her decision or his decision. No, I want the pizza. And here comes mom again, just, in a very loving way, wanting to make sure, because you know how kids are sometimes. Right? Honey, what if you don't like the pizza? The burger's the safe bet. Right? So now the child stops and thinks about it again, but sticks to their guns and says the pizza. And right in that moment, the other parent says, we're not getting the pizza. It's too big. You're not going to eat it all. It's going to be a waste of money. So the child says, fine, I'll get the burger. And life moves on. But the question to you and the audience is, in that moment, what might that child believe about their ability to make decisions?
Yes.
Either I don't make good choices, or maybe I need to check with other people before I make choices. Now, one of the things we know about parenting is that it's pretty consistent over time. Most of us parent, a little bit better than the way that we were parented, right? That's where that generational kind of programming comes in. So we know that this child probably heard a similar message around academics, how they dressed. We start having memories around the age of 3. Let's just say this child leaves home at 18. That's 15 years of programming. You imagine over time, if this message is getting reinforced in this child, they might start to develop a little bit of second guessing, a little bit of doubt about their feelings, thoughts, decisions. Do you imagine that's going to impact their self-esteem in some way?
Yeah.
Do you imagine with that self-esteem, what kind of friends are they going to gravitate to? What kind of partners are they going to select later on in life? Right. Now, this is someone that will come to me as an adult and say, Dr. Carlos, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm always doubting everything. I have no confidence. I can never just make a decision. And I'll tell them, I'll ask, like, hey, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Oh, I had a great childhood. I love my parents. We get along so well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is to help folks understand that even in environments where there wasn't chaos and trauma, which is
Mm-hmm.
the truth for many of us, these subtle messages programmed how we came to view ourselves, others, and the world around us.
Mm. All right, we do have a caller. Give me one quick second here because I can't actually hear it ringing. So let me see if I can sort out this technical issue. Caller, give me 1 second. I'm just unplugging it and see if we can actually get you on where we can hear you. Can we hear you now? All right, this is probably going to require a restart. So let me just restart the phone quickly and I will call you right back. So give me 1 second here. Sometimes this happens with the phones. But yeah, we've got a call already. So that is such an interesting example. And I'll be honest with you, it is a simple example for sure. And not necessarily one where the child was traumatized, but it shows the broader picture of how these things can impact our children. And I would have never, in a situation like that, I would have never really thought about what the impact is on that child from constantly questioning their decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And so, that then leads us to, then I tell a little bit about my story, right? So,
Yes.
I grew up in an environment with, my family, we fled Cuba in 1980 to come to the United States as political refugees. So I grew up in a Hispanic home with a father that had very low tolerance for mistakes.
Oh my God.
If you spilled a little water at the dinner table, you were going to hear it or you were going to feel it.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's Caribbean people for you. I hate to tell you, it's probably not just
not just Cubans. I mean, it's something down there in the water, right? And again, I don't blame my father. It's the way he was raised. A lot of this stuff, like you said, is generational. I also happen to have a mother that just had a lot of opinions, right? If anybody's got one of those mothers, right? Lots of opinions, and she's going to tell you about all her opinions, right?
Okay.
And then I also had an older brother who was the golden child, right? Is that sibling that never does anything wrong that you're always compared to, right? So these are all beautiful people, right? I had great relationships with them growing up. But what I learned in therapy was that my environment growing up at an age where developmentally I was trying to understand my sense of identity and myself, I was constantly being criticized, judged, or punished for anything that I was doing and or experiencing.
Okay.
So coming out of my childhood, I developed a deep sense of inadequacy, a deep sense that I wasn't good enough because nothing I did was good enough for the people around me, right? Which developed into people pleasing and perfectionism down the road, but also into a lot of anxiety because I feel like I had to go out in the world and get validation from so many different places and from so many different people because I hadn't gotten it in an environment that was more comfortable and loving, right?
Wow.
So what I tell people, Sandra, is it doesn't matter what your childhood experience is. It isn't about labeling it as traumatic or not, or good or bad. It's about understanding that everything in your environment was a ripple in the direction of the person that you became. If you had a dad that drank a lot or a mom that wasn't emotionally present, if you had parents that fought a lot, if there was divorce, if you had a sibling that was dealing with a drug addiction issue, all of these things are just little imprints. They're little imprints that we should probably get curious about so that we can understand ourselves better.
Okay, we do have a caller on the line. Wow. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Dr. Carter.
Good morning,
Yes, good morning.
I had a question. I was just listening to what you were saying just now, Dr. Carlos, and I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on just a person's natural temperament as a child. How big of a role does that play? Because we have some children who might be highly sensitive and, they might feel a deeper sense of distress from mild conflicts or even neglect, a sense of resilience, introversion, extroversion. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on the role that plays.
Yeah, beautiful question. Beautiful question. I think that some of us, temperament does have an impact, right? Some children come into the world a little bit more fearless, a little bit more curious, and a little bit slower to warm, if you will. Some of us come in with a lot more sensitivity in the world. And so obviously these things that we're talking about are going to feel much more impactful on an emotional level. But what my experience has been in working with clients is that even when we take temperament as a factor, even when we take, empathy and compassion as a factor, that the environment and the messaging is still a very powerful, powerful force, right? And so, again, let's take that kid that's a little bit more sensitive. I'll use myself as an example. I'm just somebody that can really sort of feel what other people are feeling. My empathy, right? Like I can watch a love story movie and get really emotional about it, right? That's just the way that I'm wired. Versus my brother, who may not have been impacted as much by what was going on in our home. So all of these are factors. I believe that it still puts us in a position to get really curious about our story, because they're all just data points, right? And as I put all of those data points together, it can help me understand myself from a much deeper place. But great question.
And when you talk about these data points, if you will, right, and the imprinting, this is why when people say, "Oh, someone grew up in a particular home, and then they had a sibling who also grew up in a particular home, and they're totally different," and we try to understand, how is it possible? Like, even some people do grow up in traumatic homes. One person is imprinted in a different way, and the other person just kind of rolls with the punches. It doesn't affect them.
Sure.
Some of what you're saying now allows us to put that in a better context, and it starts to make sense, because every individual has a uniquely and different experience within a family, and they also come into this world being uniquely and different. So there are no two people that come in with the same composition or the same makeup.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think one of the things that we need to consider, right, we're talking in generalities here. The truth is, if we sat with each one of those people and really investigated, what will we find, right? So for example, you said a minute ago there, Sandra, some people, it doesn't affect them. Well, does that mean that they just bury everything, right? They just spent the rest of their lives cutting themselves off from people, or just not feeling anything, and the not feeling shows up as anger, or shows up as isolation, or shows up in some other way that's either healthy or unhealthy. And then the other thing you're speaking about there, Gabor Mate, who's a psychiatrist and does a lot of work around addictions and trauma, talks about no two children, no two siblings have the same parent, for multiple different reasons. Because one, the temperament, right? And parents are going to respond to each temperament differently based on what is comfortable for them or not. Children come into the world at different times, where parents are at a very different place, either financially or in their marriage, or whatever it might be. There are gender differences, right? So every characteristic of every child is going to elicit a different aspect of the parent, right? So I'll use, my siblings as an example. My brother got to experience my parents when they still lived in Cuba for the formative years, if you will. And we were, doing well financially, and we were surrounded by family, and my parents were getting along, and they had, just been married for a year. And so he got the father that was, would take him fishing, and very loving and very patient. In my formative years, my parents had just moved to a new country. We're learning the language. We're trying to find financial means to put food on the table. The stress of their marriage started to amplify. There was a lot of distress. There was a lot of drinking. It was a very different environment. And then my sister, who came 10 years later, things had sort of settled down already. But now, she got the father that was sort of tuned out already, right? He didn't want to see the father too much. He had already done that. And a mother that was looking for, because he was tuned out, an enmeshed relationship with my sister. So all of those factors sort of can relate. And I'll tell you, my brother is a beautiful human being, but he won't talk to you about his emotions. For him, that's weakness, and we don't do that. And he was a police officer for 30-something years. where I leaned into my emotions. I talk about vulnerability. And again, no good and no bad. There's no judgment here. But what we're talking about, right, is how the different programs impact different people, right?
Wow. We've got a caller. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Morning.
Morning, sir. Hold on 1 second, Denny. I'm going to grab another caller and just put them on hold. Okay, 1 second for me. So phone lines are obviously open and you guys are taking advantage of it. We've got Denny up first. Go ahead, Denny.
About the child choosing the pizza. What if the child isn't choosing pizza, but is choosing to perhaps take advice from teenage friends that could lead them in the wrong direction in life, and the parent is trying to say, I don't think so.
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, wonderful question. I think we're talking about two sort of different incidents here, right? If my son, who's 2.5, and I'll just a little bit of background on me for the audience, I'm married to a marriage and family therapist, so another therapist in the house.
Oh
right?
my goodness!
And we have a 2.5-year-old, and my wife's been in therapy, early on as a child, and I've been through my own therapy. So it can be a circus in the house sometimes, right? But it's also really beautiful to watch. Now, if my son is trying to choose putting his hand on the stove versus something else, of course, as a father and as a protector, I'm going to have hard boundaries that I need to set in a lot of instances. But I'm also going to talk to my son about why those boundaries are there, right? So what I think is important here is that the parenting doesn't come from a place of belittling, from a place of shaming, from a place of guilt, right? Because a lot of us, those Caribbean cultures, a lot of Asian cultures, the parenting is coming from this place of like guilt and shame. And that's where we start to develop a poor sense of self and a poor sense of identity. It isn't about the rules that we're giving. Rules are rules, and they're great to have. Right? We don't want our kids to just kind of go off and do whatever they want to do. It's not about that. And the other thing that I would say here is that I think if we I love this sort of image that's talked about in child development, where if you water the garden initially and you fertilize that soil well and you put love into it, by the time that flower is growing, by the time they're teenagers, you've done the hard work. You can trust that they're going to make the good decisions. But if you have, essentially without knowing it, have sort of raised a child from the early beginning to not feel confident in themselves and to have to rely on friends. And I get it. Like there's peer pressure. We're all going to experience that as teenagers. That's a part of life. But I'm hoping that the work I'm doing now on my son is building a strong enough sense of his self separate from me, so that when he is older, he can make decisions from his own place, right? And not having to seek validation and make decisions that other people are making in an unhealthy way, because of anxiety or because of some need.
Interesting. All right, caller. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, we've got a next caller up. And by the way, we have a Caymanian who is in Thailand listening to the program, and she's reminding all fellow Caymanians to please utilize your manners, because this is one thing that's very Caymanian, saying good morning, Dr. Carlos, in class today. So we do have a very, very interesting comment. Peterkin, good morning, Peterkin Gooden says, oh my God, doctor, you licked the nail on the head when what you say about the golden child. And again, that can be a whole other show. Yeah. What if you were the golden child? Or what if you were the sibling of a golden child? Yeah. How has that impacted you?
Woo! Yeah, the golden child has to deal with a whole other set of circumstances.
Yes,
the pressure, the expectations. Yeah. So again, we're not judging between any of these. It's just curiosity. How do we bring curiosity to our story?
Yeah. Shani says, Dr. Caller, this is what we all need right now. Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning again.
Good morning.
I got cut off. I actually had another question for Dr. Carlos.
Absolutely.
Dr. Carlos, while I was listening to everything you were saying in the pause between when I got cut off, I don't know how familiar you are with some of the issues that go on here in Cayman. especially when it comes to male trauma. But I've called in before and I've mentioned it before.
Yeah.
And I think it's a wider. I think it's wider than K-Mom. This sort of, how do we say, neglect that's placed on, male trauma, male pain, what many men have gone through growing up, and it's sort of, suck it up, be a man.
Yeah.
You're not masculine. And in light of what you just said about raising your son, I just wanted to tweak my question a bit and ask you, if the traditional definition of masculinity, right, is propped up by denying male pain, what new narrative could we give our son? One that treats vulnerability as a shared strength rather than a private weakness. And how can parents, teachers, coaches, mentors, what have you, how can they weave that narrative into the everyday arenas where boys learn what manhood means, like in the living rooms, the classrooms, the playgrounds, the locker rooms, before that silence sets in?
Beautiful question. Thank you, my friend.
Yes,
That's
thank you so much
question.
for
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for sort of giving me a little bit of insight into, some of the issues there. They're not too dissimilar from the issues we face here in the States, right? And so here in the States, June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And so I talk a lot about this and was just on a program talking about this. So there's two components there that I want to touch on. One is the narrative, right, that you're saying that how do we shift? But I think the second part is the emotions. And let me reference that part first, okay? And so, because this is more general to both men and women, okay? Again, culturally and for different reasons, depending on where we grew up, most of us, when we were little, and we felt any of the so-called, and I put this in air quotes, negative emotions, right? When we're experiencing sadness, disappointment, shame, guilt, fear, right? What were we told? Suck it up, right? There's children starving in Africa. What are you upset about? What's the problem, right? Now, two things that happen there. One is that our sense of what we're going through is minimized, like it's not important, right? But like you don't know what that child is going through in that moment. Right. Like just the other day, I came home and my son, he's like, Daddy, bath. Right. He wanted me to give him a bath. And I was like, buddy, I got to go send some emails and then we'll do it. And he just fell to the ground like the world was falling apart around him, crying and sobbing. Right. Which I was like, whatever, it's no big deal. But in his world, it's a huge deal. Right. So I don't think we minimize those things. So anyway, most of us developed a deep sense of shame when those emotions came up. So very early on, we were conditioned and wired to suppress them, to push them down or to push them aside. What that means is that most of us weren't given the opportunity to learn how to navigate those emotions because they didn't go away when we became adults, right? Any of my adults out there lately feel shame, guilt, grief, anger,
want to throw a tantrum? Yes.
Right. So the reason that those things feel so overwhelming as adults is because we were robbed of the opportunity to know how to express and feel them and just deal with them early on, right? So we sort of created these what I call these like monsters in the closet. Now if shame comes up, not only am I dealing with or like sadness comes up, not only am I dealing with guilt and shame, I'm also putting on this mask and pretending like everything's okay, right? Now, even in households where you might have been told like, hey, cheer up, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be okay. Yeah, maybe. But like in that moment, you were robbed again of this opportunity to learn how to feel. So what most of us did unconsciously, unknowingly, and unintentionally is we started to hide our emotions, especially the tough ones. And so for men, now coming back to that, yeah, I mean, again, I talk about growing up in a Hispanic household. You don't cry. That's for the weak. What's wrong with you? right? And then, 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I was in the military for 6 years. How do you think they feel about crying or feeling your emotions?
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I became a fireman. I was, a hero, so I couldn't express myself. Well, in my 30s, when I'm riddled with depression and anxiety, and I finally go see a therapist, she tells me, Carlos, you haven't felt an emotion in almost 30 years. What did you think was going to happen?
Wow.
And I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for me, that was the initial stages of recognizing that I needed some new tools on how to feel my emotions, but that I also took it on as a goal in my life to unlock this narrative for other men, because I had struggled for way too many years with this thing, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, struggling in silence, dealing with suicidal thoughts, dealing with depression, when all I needed to do was ask for help. And why hadn't I asked for help? Because society and my culture had told me my whole life that was weak. So I'll share another quick story, of my family. Last year, around this time, my father had passed after a 2-year battle with dementia. And it was a really, really hard time for me. My father and I didn't have a great relationship early on. And so, later on, I wanted to mend that relationship and things got better, but it never got to where I wanted it to. And I felt like I had run out of time. So I was dealing with grief around that. A month after my father passes, my wife and I lose a pregnancy. And around that time, I was also dealing with the struggle of my business, not doing super well. And so I was just feeling heavy. Plus the work that I do with my clients every day, they come and they share all of their traumas and their hurts and their pains. And I come home one day and my wife could just sense that I'm heavy. She could just tell I'm, tuned out. The beautiful thing about my wife is she won't ask me, how are you doing? Right? The therapist in her came over, put her hand on my heart and said, how's your heart? And in that moment, what an invitation. It's the permission I needed to feel. And I just started crying in that moment. The loss of my father, the loss of the pregnancy, all of the hard stuff, the pain and agony of the clients that I was working with.
Yes.
And my wife in that moment did the most miraculous and beautiful thing.
Yeah.
She went and she grabbed my son, who was looking very confused, and she put him in my arms as I was crying. And he looked at me with his little hands, was sort of drying off the tears. And what she said to him was, Jonah, this is daddy dealing with big emotions. This is what it looks like.
Wow. That's profound. Oh my God. Caller, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want, I'm listening to everything Dr. Carlos is saying, and it's really good. Sandra, you have to bring him back on again, right?
Yeah,
and not just for June.
Hopefully
not
he does
just
his
for
own
June.
show.
Yeah. He needs to have a whole show all to himself. Right?
Oh my God. I think we're all being impacted this morning for sure.
But Dr. Carlos, I was talking, like I said, I don't know how much you know, but
he knows a lot. Let's assume he knows a lot. We've already seen that. Right. Yes.
Okay. Take something as serious as, and I know that this is the cold hard truth, so I'm gonna just say it. Pedophilia is a big problem in the Caribbean to the point where it's normalized. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of emphasis is on protecting our girls, which they deserve all the protection that they can get. But I feel like not enough attention is placed on our boys. And you see it in the narrative, in the cultural narrative. If something happens where there was, I think it was like a year ago or 2 years ago, Sandra, remind me, there was some story about some guy who got sexually assaulted in jail. And the jokes that were just piling in. Oh, you better not drop soap. It's like they are like I've known of grown men who have been troubled by older women when they were boys. And and it's affected them. And the cultural attitude here is well, what happened? You're supposed to like that kind of thing. It's a woman, like like what are you?
Yeah.
And there's just this. I feel like there's this wider cultural neglect given towards men in some of the trauma that they've gone through. I mean, that's not the only one, but I just using that for an example. And my question, I guess, I was sort of asking you, how can we change that cultural narrative? Like as a culture, it's going to be slow. It's going to be, progress is going to be slow, but how do we move that to where men can open up and boys can open up, even to more serious things like that?
Yeah. Thank you so much, caller. Appreciate it. We do have another caller also.
Yeah. I mean, just to answer that question, my friend, you're leading that, right? By coming on here and asking those questions. And I think the more conversation we have, the less, stigmatized people feel. The more we're talking about it, the less we have to be afraid about it. And that's why, for years I kept my story to myself, but I realized I'm being selfish. I need to talk about my own traumas. I need to talk about the things that have happened to me. And I think that when each and every single one of us do that, when we do the work on ourselves to let go of the fear, of the anger, of the resent, of the shame, we can then tell our stories. And every single one of us that steps up to tell our story gives permission for someone else to get brave and courageous to tell their story.
Oh my God.
And the more people tell their stories, right, the things can't hide in the darkness anymore.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And it's so interesting that you say that, because that's one of the things that I try to push. And I think a lot of people don't always get it. Like, why is Sandy talking about child abuse? Why is she talking about domestic abuse? Why is she having this person on who is in this particular situation right now? Why are we talking openly about suicide? And it's like, we have to normalize the conversation. None of these topics, in my opinion, should be off limit, right? We should be able to discuss them. We should be able to be genuine and authentic and share our experiences, share our stories, and invite others. And I have seen, I'm going to just mute the caller there for a second. It's not like they're having a side conversation, but I have seen for myself people who have called into this program, right? Years of us talking about child abuse, and they finally say, #MeToo. I was a victim. Someone hurt me when I was a child. And I don't know if other people have noticed the transition of the conversation, but I've witnessed it right here on this program. So let's go ahead to this caller. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Doctor. My manners.
Yes, good morning.
Nice to have you. Good morning, Sandy.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful topic, one that we really need, because we need to try to save our kids, to let them realize they're so valuable. And I say that also just in the week that guys too, we need to protect them. We just protect our girls, and boys go through the same. They're humans. They have the same emotions, but like the doctors say, hey, we tell them, go and be a man. And how do you go and be a man? You never been taught, you're a child.
Exactly.
And I sort of, when I was young, I always felt for people. That's one thing I've had in my life. So when my son came to me one day and somebody had hurt him, and the person that hurt him, he didn't expect it was deep. And he said, oh, I feel like cry, but I know I can't. I said, yes, you can. You can cry. I say, because you're releasing your anger, your anxiety, and your emotion is showing that you have emotions. It's okay. And he just hugged me and he cried.
Beautiful.
And he was pretty young. And, I have a set of kids that always takes a liking to my daughter when she's been in school. And they're always these kids, because she have that soft thing like me, that has been through a rough home. And they will come amongst me, and everybody wants to take me over. She'll say, no, that's my mommy. I said, no, I'm your mommy too, but I just had her, but, and they start to release things to me, and real deep, something they probably didn't do for my daughter. And I tell them, I don't look on you bad, because you were a child and you didn't know better. So you did your best, what you know. But now that you're older, I said, I'm going to pray because the doctor is a therapist, but I'm a prayer. I believe in prayer. And I also believe in him. And that you need them. That's why everything is made for everybody. It is your faith and what you believe and how strong you are. So, yes, his purpose is there. I've prayed my way out because I've been in a lot of situations. And this is why I tell my kids, don't be rude, but speak out. Most of the kids that you see that commit suicide, if you look on them, a lot of time they're the ones that seem to have it all together. Because sometimes they pretend right through their life that they have it all together. They want to look like they're perfect and they got it together. And their parents are saying, oh, my child, wow. And my child is this at time. Underneath, the child is suffering. They're so tired of hearing their parents probably say that because it's not true to them. So they're in a house that sometimes they want to probably get out. So people have had a problem with me when I didn't give my daughter a phone, but she didn't have a problem with me because I raised her. That social media would destroy you. Listen, there's so much more you could do, my darling. And when she got a phone was COVID because her school called me. And at the time she was 15 years old, my last one. And the school said, we understand you don't believe, in the phone so early. And you told her later on she would have it and all of this social media and she can't have Facebook and all of this. And I said, yes. But they said, we need you to give it to her now because we're doing things at school that whatever. So she got released in COVID at 15, going on 16. Now people would tell her, oh, your mother, blah, blah, blah. I said, this is my saying for my kids. When I had you and I was hollering in the hospital, baby, I didn't see them. I don't know who they are. So the pain was real for me then, and the pain is still real for me right now with you because you are my child. I want the best for you. And I want you to be able to help your friends. I said, because sometimes you have something to give your friends. I watch you and you're strong and you speak out. Your friends are not all that way. And I think that's why you are glued to many of them because they want to have that spirit. I said, so let them be their self. My daughter came home one day. She used to go to Truefield School and she was telling me how they were all laughing at this child at school. And I said, were you laughing too? Yes. I said, don't you ever do that again. And I said, why were you all laughing at her? She said, because she's so fat, mommy. And I said, well, you know what I want you to do? I want you to be her best friend. You protect her when they laugh, say that's not nice. And I say, you go to school and you start to be her best friend. One day she came back home to me and she said, mommy, we are cousins. I said, see there? I said, look at that. You were destroying your cousin. She said, but she really was fat, mom. I didn't realize. And I thank you. And, we as parents too, we got to help these kids because peer pressure is real and they will follow what other kids do. And they're not bad kids. They just pick it up. And what you pick up sometimes is hard to break. It becomes a trait. It becomes part of you. So we have to make sure that we allow our kids to pick up good traits. And this is what I tell the kids that come into my home. I said, sweetheart, you're beautiful. You're wonderful and made. If you make a mistake, honey, I understand, but that's not the end of the world. Don't ever think. And, I studied that child. And they come some Sundays, they go to church, they eat with us. And I keep my eye on that child. And I talk things not directly. Don't commit suicide now. No, because that's not the right way to speak to them. They're already so emotional. So I was telling them, I said, there's nothing too hard that you go through. And I explained that I've been through so much hardship. They say, you, mom? I say, yeah. But I kept my eye on the prize to know that darkness, there was light at the tunnel. So I wanted to reach that light. So there's a light at your tunnel, and I'm here for you. Call me anytime that you feel that you need to talk or you feel desperate. But in other words, I'm saying to them, if you ever feel like committing suicide, call me. I'm here, but I'm not saying it in that way because sometimes then they feel the shame again because who is she? She thinks I'm going to commit suicide and blah, blah. And they think they're stronger, but they're weaker sometimes. So we really have to study these kids. And it's a part of my heart for kids.
Thank you, Ms.
You all have
Joyce.
a blessed weekend.
You too.
And it's my subject.
I appreciate
Okay.
it so much. Thank you so
Okay.
much. So let's take a couple comments that are coming in on WhatsApp. This person says, "Good morning, Sandy. Thanks a million for bringing Dr. Carlos in the show. Really appreciated. God bless." This other person says, "Sandy, can you please ask him how we can change the male toxic culture in the Caribbean towards that hides or promotes male sexual offenders and child abuse?" The same question. Now, Dr. Carlos, I'm going to put a pin here in this one because this is a show topic for you. So I'm giving you tons of show topics here. But let me just say this. We're Caribbean people. Most of us have never lived anywhere else. So when we about these things, we talk about what is happening, the culture of these things in the Caribbean context. I lived in the States for 15 years. I pretty much grew up in the States, went to USF, completed my first degree, and then moved back home. So I have a little bit of a different cultural experience with Americans, African Americans in particular. And what I can say is, I always tell people this, as Caymanians, we think our Caribbean or Caymanian narrative is unique and different from anybody else in the world. But the truth is, we're all human beings. And so these things transcend into different cultures. Now, maybe at some levels, we might think the US is more advanced when it comes to, protecting children and doing certain things. And then we see cases that demonstrate, no, they have failed. You talk about your Hispanic culture, where men have a very, very machismo role that they have to play. That's similar to the Caribbean culture. So there's so many similarities, I think, that are there. Where you even take, for example, you try to either vilify, or you have the woman as the Mary. She has to be absolutely pure. And, I was watching a documentary maybe about a month ago on the dancing boys of Afghanistan. Traumatic, because these children are basically subjected to child abuse by men. And in their cultures, it seems to be something that people turn a blind eye to. They accept, because they put women on such a pedestal that they can't interact with women. They can't socialize with women. They can't do any of these things. So what they do is they take young boys and they sort of use them as replacement for women, and they have social relationships with them, sexual relationships. It's just wild and crazy. But as I was sitting there listening to this, I have thought, maybe to not this extreme degree in 2025, but there are a lot of cultures who have put women on a pedestal where there's certain things that we don't want them doing. They can't join the military. They're the weaker sex. And, so these conversations transcend not just the Caribbean culture, folks, but all cultures. But I want to say that particular question and topic, this is an entire show topic. And I saw Amy's comment. Amy, thank you so much for this, because again, going back to how we're treating little boys versus little girls, she says, please let's not forget the woman who's winding up on a little boy in Badabanu years ago, and everyone thought it was a joke. Completely unacceptable and sick. Kids are kids and should not be subjected to anything like that, male or female. And Amy, I remember when I posted that video out and I called it out in the caption, there were people who were attacking me for being, oh, you're too this, you're too that, mind your own business, you're old fashioned. The little boy doesn't know what's going on, that he's being sexualized at such a young age, and all this madness. Dr. Carlos, one of the greatest gifts we have in this day and age is the ability to access information, experts such as yourself like never before. Here you are this morning, literally reaching over 400 people on the live stream, countless others on radio. And I think to myself, 20 years ago, we wouldn't do this. We'd have to all be in Tampa, maybe sitting down listening to you in an auditorium. So what do you say about how we treat the broader question now of how we treat little boys and little girls as they're growing up? We impress upon them our cultural and social norms. Blue is for boys, pink is for girls. And, I have a daughter, her favorite color, she's 8 years old. Her favorite color is blue. I don't care that it's not pink. I don't force that on her. If she sees a pink toy and a blue toy and she's like, no, mom, my favorite color is blue. I love the color blue and I want to get the blue toy. I say, go ahead.
Yeah. These are all sort of great questions and big questions, right? How do we sort of impact these more deeply ingrained systemic issues that have, are a product of things that have taken hold over years and generations, right? It's not going to happen overnight. But I hear the outrage and I hear the pain that's coming from our human pain in watching this, right? So how are we all responding? We're responding from anger. Why anger? Right? Because anger is an emotion that drives energy forward. But behind that anger, if any of us looks, it's pain. And the reason we can experience pain for another human being is because of empathy. Right? And so one of the things that we need to start doing is understanding that a child isn't a small adult. They don't view the world or experience the world the way adults do. And that's often how we raise our children as little adults. We expect them to be as resilient. We expect them to understand the same level of things. We expect them to often grow up much sooner than they have to. So, again, why I often ask people to understand their own story. It isn't so that you can blame people. It isn't to make your parents responsible. It isn't for any of that. It's because as you start to do your own healing, as you start to let go of your own resentments and angers and bitterness, and right, what starts to show up is love. It's human compassion. When there's no more anxiety and depression and anger, like what starts to show up for us is human compassion. And so I'm a big believer that how we start to create all of this impact is by looking in the mirror first. What do you need to change in you? How can you heal so that you can be a better vehicle, a better vessel, a permission slip for the person next to you to heal, your partner, your son, your kid, your mother, your father, your colleague, your friend. That's how we start to create the ripples of shift that our kids will see and our kids' kids will see. The other day, I got really frustrated because my son was needing my attention, and I was in the middle of doing something for work, and all of it mounted up and the irritation came up to the surface, and I slammed my hand on the table. Now, my son wasn't responsible for my irritation. My son didn't trigger me. That was something in me that got triggered. And so he got afraid. And in that moment, mom came and sort of held him because he started crying. I scared him. And then I was upset at myself. But then I was really happy at myself. Because you see, some 30-something years ago, that anger would have been my father spanking me because I pissed him off. But because I've done the work on myself through therapy and meditation and reading books and healing myself, my son didn't have to receive that from me, which means my son's going to grow up in a different home and his kids are going to grow up in a different home. So how do we make these bigger impacts in the world, in our society, in our communities? It starts with looking in the mirror and healing ourselves first.
Wow. So amazing. Thank you for that. All right. This parent has the following comment. They said, what he said is so true that no two siblings have the same parents. I personally parent my sons differently because I have to speak through their very different love languages. I come at them two different ways to get the same response from each of them. They said they're waiting on Mr. Amelia to call in this morning. People need to also realize that therapy is only as good as the person's willingness to do the work.
Great.
So important. Yes, absolutely.
And if I can say something else here, look, therapy was one of the tools that worked. And I get that we still have a long way to go here in the States around the stigma with therapy.
Yes.
But I don't care where you do the work.
Yeah.
For the first 6 years, it was me picking up books and understanding anxiety and understanding personality traits and understanding upbringing. Other times it's been, going to a weekend retreat and to better know myself. At other times it's been, focusing on religion and spirituality, whatever the tool is that's going to help you get there, lean into that. Start anywhere, but start.
Let's start. All right, we've got a few more callers on the line. Oh my goodness, beautiful. Just let me bring the other caller on, but we'll go ahead and start with the 0799. You're up first. Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, dear.
And good morning to Dr. Carlos.
Yes,
and
good morning.
I'm very touched by your show this morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
The video that was going on yesterday, I traumatized by it, to say son and mother. I know where I'm coming from.
Right.
It hurt me a lot because there is someone we need to talk to say, don't do that. That's, your mom. I'm coming from a very traumatized situation when I have my environment, and sometimes your environment can take out the worst person of you, right?
Yes.
And I'm just like, as I said, it's with tears in my eyes to hear Dr. Carlos talk about the issue. My son went away 2 years ago, and he was going through something similar that I did never listen to him, and I never understand him, because bigger woman can take advantage of you. And I never actually understand that. And I was all against him with a lot of comments that other people giving, that we never listen to our songs, that we think they're a macho man, you just need to go out and do what you have to do as a man. And that's not how life is. And that's not into their world, because these kids then see better things they can do with their life and going down that way, right? So as I said, I'm happy for this show this morning because it touched me. It's making me understand myself more. And for me to look in the mirror and become a better person, I only pray every day that my environment can get better every day, so my mind will stay stable and I can stay focused more on myself and what I want to be for my grandchildren them and my children them, which is still alive, and I'm still alive, and my mom and everybody around me.
Wow.
And thank Dr. Carlos, and thank you for this show. And have a wonderful weekend, everyone. I appreciate it. I wish you can bring him on even one time a month. That would be just
well, that's the hope, is that he will have his own show. But thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And, to that caller's point, Dr. Carlos, as long as we're alive and as long as we have breath, we have to continue on this journey of life. And that means continually looking in the mirror, continually working on ourselves, and continually trying to do better. It's not we're going to get fixed at a certain age. Like by 40, we figured it all out. We're great people. We're wonderful parents. It's a journey. Life is a journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've got another caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Garcia. Good morning, Sandra.
Yes.
I have a little bit of a different question. Forgive me. I rushed in to hear if it's been asked. I'm the mom of a son, but he is basically the only boy, the youngest of, I would say, 5 girls. And how do you, as a mother, he does have, his father is involved and plays an active role, but he is primarily swamped by women. There's a little bit of a little emperor syndrome going on there. He is the youngest. He is quite young. There is quite an age gap. And in this neck of the woods, and forgive me if I offend anyone, it's not my intention, but how do I raise, or how can I raise an emotionally intelligent young man and still have him have his own masculine traits? Because I do find that he is, as we say in the Caribbean, soft, but
there's
he is
nothing wrong
very.
with that. We're just addressing this, that what you think is soft is just him having feelings and emotions. And so don't call him soft. Don't make him think that that's abnormal. I'm not the therapist here, but I'm just saying
I want to chime in here, Cassandra. Yeah. I think, right, it's in the question that we're asking. There's an assumption in your question that the way he is not okay. And I'm gonna tell you something here, right? Because what happened to me was that my culture, my parents, my home, and my society was telling me that in order to be okay, in order to be a man, in order to feel good about myself, I needed to be this tough, strong guy. So what did I do? When I went into the military, for anyone that knows about the military here in the US, the United States Marine Corps is considered the toughest of them all. So that's the one I chose. I chose a job then, right, as like a tough guy, right? And, I worked out every day, and I got a lot of women. I did all of the things that society told me a man does. But on the inside, I was struggling and suffering because the part of me that's authentic and real is that I feel. And now today, part of why I get so much traction here in the States is because I talk to policemen, firemen, veterans, and men who have been part of the same narrative and part of the same programming, but I do it from a place of vulnerability. I do it from a place where I say it's okay to feel because I know what you're struggling with. And so that girly side of me, if that's how we want to talk about it, the sensitive side is my biggest asset. It's my heroic strength. It's what makes me Superman in my world. So we don't know what his role is going to be. We don't know what God has for him and why, he's the youngest, surrounded by women. Maybe that's a part of his calling, right? So let's not judge it. Let's the sort of thing I hear today is that we're all human. We don't have to make these constant distinctions. We're all human. We all love. We all feel. And how can we foster that to the best of our ability?
Agreed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful question, though. I'm a mother of a single daughter, and that's the only one that I'm going to have. So I have no boys. But, I think to Aisle 2025's point says, wow, there's nothing wrong with being soft. So again, as Caribbean people, as Hispanic people, as African Americans, we think soft equates weakness, and soft isn't good. And Aisle 2025 says that basically maybe what she's saying is she's scared that he's going to turn out gay because he has sisters. And again, we've got to change this narrative around sexuality. Because someone is soft and they have feelings doesn't mean anything. It has nothing to do with their sexuality. And even if he does turn out gay, so what? You know what I'm saying? I really want, and I know that's a big one. People listening going, oh, Sandy, you're going too far this morning. Now we can't have gay people running around the Cayman Islands. Everybody knows I'm a supporter of the LGBT community. I don't think anybody chooses to be gay. That is just part of your DNA. That is just who you are and what you are, right? So Marshall says, yes, very powerful message from Dr. Carlos. Damien says, so if boys play with dolls at a young age, he says, exactly. So boys play with dolls at a young age, that does not mean that they're going to change their gender or have the power to decide that at a young age. And, it's true because my daughter loves to, of course, she's playing with dolls as well, but she also loves non-traditional toys. She loves Legos and stuff. And I think that's great. I'm like, play with whatever you want, because I know Legos and building blocks helps with logic and math, and it, fires off certain things in the brain. I think we just need to stop trying to pigeonhole certain behavior in a box to say that, well, if you do this, that means that you're going to turn out like this, especially when it comes to these gender roles. I say throw them out the window, But let's read another comment that has come in here. Give me one quick second. I see Mr. Simon, the air conditioning guy, calling me. Hey, Simon. Not too bad. I'm live on radio, so make it quick. Yes. Well, they're there, so I'll tell them you're on your way. Okay. Okay. No worries. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, bye-bye. That's what you call fantastic service. Polar Bear, give them a big shout out. Saw a little error message on the thermostat for some tenants this morning, so he's just calling me to say I'm going to get out there. Appreciate it. Oh, I love Polar Bear. All right, folks. So this person says today that Dr. Carlos, you're speaking to my inner child. Hashtag
Yeah.
Heal Me Friday. I know the day is about the man, but God, mighty God, he's also speaking directly to me. And listen, yes, we are honoring and respecting men in our communities with mental health awareness. It is, we just celebrated Men's Health Awareness Week. I think we're still in the week and the month as well in the US. The UK celebrates it, I think, in November. But these discussions are good for all of us. Again, all of this transcends gender, right? We can understand how we have been imprinted from a very, very early age by our experiences or parental experiences or interactions with our siblings. When you were talking about the necessity to keep it bottled in and to always be tough and not to cry, gosh, Dr. Carlos, I think you're speaking to all of us today, because sometimes we do grow up in an environment where crying is associated with weakness. Even as women, there's a lot of women who don't cry. Like the only time you're allowed to cry is, at a funeral. Yeah. You're not allowed to have a good cry. And I often think about, I remember one time my daughter, she had an epic meltdown. I can't even remember what it was about. She was just, she was still in her little feeding chair, because I can picture her now. And she was having peas. And I actually took a little picture of her because the peas all over her face, all over her little white shirt, was just such a cute moment. But she was having a moment. And I'm going to tell you the growth that I have personally had. When I was in my 20s, I'm so glad I didn't have children, because I would have been a different parent. Yeah. You know how you were talking about how you get a different parent throughout their life? I would have been a bit different parent. I would have brought more dysfunctionality, more chaos to any child's life. So I held off and I held off and I held off until the very last minute. I was in my early 40s. I'm like, okay, I don't think I can hold off anymore. But I'm so glad that I did. Mm-hmm. Because I would have been the parent who would have been hitting the child for every little thing, yelling at the child, not understanding the emotions that children go through. When I was in my 40s, 20-something years later, I was educated, a lot better read, understood that physical punishment is not the answer. Mm-hmm. You don't have to control children by beating them into submission. Mm-hmm. Right? There are other more effective ways of parenting and disciplining. And so even when she was younger and she would have these, she only had one or two really epic meltdowns, I would let her. I allowed it. And I wasn't yelling and screaming, you better stop right now, I'm going to beat you. I'm like, nope. I said, go ahead. Cry, spit out those green peas. I don't like green peas either. I was just like, have a moment. Yeah. Because when I think about this is, again, when you talk about the growth that we can have, but we have to be willing to engage in the growth process, right? When I have read countless reports, how hard it is to regulate your emotions. As an adult, sometimes I feel like I'm not regulating very well. Okay. Like I need a moment. I need a timeout in the corner. Yeah. Imagine a baby who's not even vocal yet. Yeah. We taught her a little bit of sign language. We're not proficient in sign language, but we taught her a little bit, like asking for milk and mommy, daddy, bath time. She knew what bath time was, but she was understanding some of the world around her and doesn't have the capacity to explain it, didn't have language, and didn't have the 40 years of experience that I had. So how am I going to get upset at a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, even a 10-year-old or a teenager? When they've not lived life, and the more I process that, I'm like, I'm not yelling at this child because she's going to have a tantrum right now. Right. As an adult, I want to have a tantrum every once in a while. Yeah, Sandra, so beautifully said, right? We talked about the crying. Fine, that's one thing. Yeah. But, the expression of emotion. I mean, for all of the adults out there, if you're feeling frustrated with something, right? How's it going to feel if somebody says to you, stop it, stop being frustrated, right? I mean, that's just adding gas to the fire. So why would you tell a child who doesn't, like you just said, who doesn't know how to regulate their emotions? Their brain hasn't developed enough to know how to do that. They haven't navigated the emotions enough or had enough experience like we have as adults. So like, I remember in my house growing up, if I expressed like the most minute amount of frustration about something,
my parents gave me a look, or my dad gave me a spanking, right? Just for like being frustrated, like that, this idea of like, I'll give you something to cry about. So what happens is, I remember going to my room often and just like sitting and festering in anger with nowhere for it to go other than to sit there in shame. So what happens to us is when we develop that as a coping mechanism, we repress. It's like a pressure cooker over the years where we just stuff emotions, stuff emotions, stuff emotions. And then, the second someone pisses us off or so-called triggers us, all of this anger is what rises to the surface. But a lot of times it's not anger, it's feelings of rejection, of pain, of ridicule, right? And for men, I'm sure it's there in the islands and in Cayman, but here in the United States and around, like, anger is an acceptable emotion. It's okay for men to get angry. So like, we either are okay or we can be furious and pissed off and losing our stuff, right? But what I try to share with people is like, that's the importance of experiencing emotions. It's not just the crying, it's all of the other ones too, because when we bottle that up, we're holding all of that energy, which later on can turn into disease in the body. It turns into stress, high cortisol levels, issues with our sleep, issues with our diet, right? Those emotions need a healthy outlet or they're going to make us sick. They're killing us.
Wow. Amazing. Jim said, let kids simply be kids, but a lot of us don't even know what that means because we weren't allowed to be kids ourselves, right? Yeah. We're expected to be miniature adults. IL 2025 says, yes, nothing wrong with that. Let your kids be who they are. Jim says many miss the definition of individuality, and that's important too. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but this person says, I hope Cayman has better crisis lines. If you call emergency lines, they never tell you to go to the hospital. I hope Cayman gets better services. So, those are some of the things that continue to be worked on here in terms of mental health access, especially in emergency situations. So Amy says, kids are a lot smarter than we think. And they not only can understand sexism, but they already are experiencing it at school. Girls experience it when they're told girls can't play football. And boys are experiencing it when they say that, when they're told that they shouldn't cry. I've had age-appropriate conversations with 7 and 9-year-olds, and they perfectly understand and can explain what sexism is. Can give me examples of it and explain why it's not okay and how it hurts others. Start these conversations young. Zoe says, very good programming today. Thank you so much, Zoe. So 936-2626, phone lines are open. If you're calling from a Flow number, it is toll free. So thanks, big shout out to Flow for the toll free number for their customers. Amazing. I'm just filtering through a few more comments that we have here because I'm sure I've missed some because there've been a lot. So Damien talks about narcissistic parenting. Oh my God, another show topic.
Yes.
How does a child navigate having a narcissistic parent? You can't. That's going to have a profound imprint.
A lot of repercussions. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I often find, and I think it might have been Amy or someone was just talking about, like, how knowledgeable children are, right? They do understand a lot more. What has happened for most of us, because of the parents we grew up around, we don't like kids that ask a lot of questions because of our own ego and pride that we're so sensitive about. We take that as a child being rude, or we take that as a child, being out of line, when really they're just being curious. Exactly. So what do? Our anger comes out, boxes them in and represses them, and doesn't, again, give them the opportunity to flourish, to be curious, to learn. The other day, and I'm going to come back. God bless you, Sandy.
Thank you.
I'm going to come back and talk about this narcissistic parenting, but I want to share a story.
Yes.
So the other day I had been traveling for a few days. And so when I got back home, my son was so happy to see me. And he was so excited. Daddy's home, daddy, let's play, daddy. And I said, okay, buddy, but we're going to go to dinner first. So go put on your shoes. And after we come back from dinner, we're going to play. Now, remember, my son is about 2.5 years old. So he's just maybe starting now to make some memories and cognitive processing. So I go out to the car to get my luggage and bring it in from the house, or bring it into the house. And my son, as he's putting on his shoes, freaks out. And he starts saying, "Daddy, wait me, Daddy, wait for me." Afraid that Daddy was going to leave again on another trip. So I come into the house. I'm like, "Buddy, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Like, Daddy's home. Like, we're going out to dinner." And in that moment, he stops and he looks at me with kind of shoulders defeated, and he says, "I'm sorry, Daddy."
Oh.
Now, why is he sorry?
Right.
We're not teaching him compassion and empathy, right? Like, he's sorry because he has just experienced that Dad is disappointed with him or upset. Kids feel this very early on, as early on as 1 year, the research shows. So in that moment, Mom had been in the kitchen and she comes over and she's like, "Jonah, it's totally okay. You were afraid that Daddy was going to leave again and you were feeling scared." Which, right in that moment, I'm like, "Oh, right. I see what's happening here." So I get down on his level, Sandra, and I'm like, "Buddy, it's okay. You were upset because you thought Daddy was going to leave. It's absolutely okay to feel afraid or upset, regardless of what Mommy and Daddy need you to feel." Right? Now, he's probably not going to have a memory of me telling him this, but the imprinting, like you said, Sandy, right? Because what I want my son to develop is a strong sense of self. That it's okay for him to have an experience around a certain circumstance, regardless of what others are feeling or need him to feel. What most of us grew up with is a strong sense of other, right? Don't do that. It's going to piss off your father. Don't do that. Your mom doesn't like that. Stop. You're bothering your sister. And so what we develop is not a strong sense of self. It's like, oh, how do I need to manipulate or change how I'm acting or feeling so that others can be okay with me? Which, later on down the road turns into people pleasing and everything else. So coming back to the narcissistic parenting, the narcissistic parent doesn't have the capacity to look inward and regulate themselves. So they impose the threatening message and emotions onto the child. So the child is impacted by that in a multitude of ways. But one that's always coming from a shame of the self. I'm not okay. I'm inadequate. People don't love me. There could be a deep sort of message there of I'm unlovable, right? And we could just reflect on how that can have ripples later on. There's a beautiful book that's called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And most of us could probably read this book and relate with pieces of it. And again, this isn't to blame parents, folks, right? Like when I think about my parents, like, I think about the environment my dad grew up in. He had a twin brother who he lost when he was 16. My dad lost his mother when he was 8 years old. I know that he had a lot of anger and pain in himself that he never had the opportunity to go to therapy and deal with. My mom's father leaves when she's 9 years old, and that's the person she adored the most, and sort of endures a lot of stuff when she was a teenager. So I know that my parents were just never got the opportunity to handle their own trauma. And that's why, that's why I sort of came, and had to deal with some of that.
Yes.
But it's about understanding myself. It's about understanding myself so that I can do better on me, for me, but also for the people around me. Because the more I heal, the more the people around me heal. The better husband I am, the more compassionate a father I am, the better a friend I am, the better listener I am to my clients, right? And so we gotta get curious about our story.
Wow, so important. Yeah, and I even reflect. I had an aunt who was extremely strict and controlling. And when you talk about the imprinting, a lot of my relationships, I took that control. Like I became her, which as much as I despised her personality, that part of her personality, I should say, because that's all I was exposed to from a parenting perspective. I became the controller. I was the one who was like, this is how it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do. And even now, there are times that I have to be very, very careful because that starts to creep out, and I'm like, oh God, I gotta pull it back. And so my first couple relationships were doomed to failure because I would pick people who needed me to save them. And so I also became the savior because it's easier to control people who need you to save them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Indeed.
Because if they don't have the same emotional regulation as you, they're not maybe as intelligent. I remember my first husband, not as tech savvy. He always needed me for something, trying to help with the budget. And so it's like, there were times when I felt like I was more a parent to him than a partner. And then at some point I had an aha moment. And I'm like, I don't have any kids yet.
Yeah.
I don't want a child as a partner. And so I'm not blaming the other person. I need to look at why I keep choosing people like this who need me to save them. Right. So I had a rule. I said, okay, after that relationship, I'm done with that. I don't pick people. And this is when you kind of, like the Bible talks about people being equally yoked. I'm not going to pick someone who needs me to mother them, who needs me to save them, who needs me to do whatever. Pick someone who's a lot more aligned with me. And then you're more likely to have just a more engaging relationship, better compatibility, all of these other things. Someone was asking, what is a narcissistic parent?
Yeah. So narcissism, at least here in the States, we consider it as a clinical diagnosis under the subsection of personality disorders. Okay, and what a personality disorder, it is often rooted in a deep trauma around relationships, right? So narcissistic traits often are sort of associated with somebody that's very egotistical, with someone that's never wrong, with someone that doesn't have emotional awareness, with someone that's always blaming others, with someone that's always going to gaslight you and make you feel like you're the problem, is never able to sort of look at their role in the relationship. And so those are, traits and characteristics that are essentially not coming from, they're coming from a place of dysfunction interpersonally, right? Or are not in a healthy place. And so, you can sort of imagine how it would feel to interact with somebody like this when they're always one-upping you, always making you feel wrong, always making you feel like, you're flawed and you're to blame. It makes it very challenging to have a relationship when people have some of these traits.
Wow. Cindy, good morning to Cindy. She is asking if you can speak about the absentee parent. So this is very, very interesting. Absentee parenting. What is that?
Yeah. Again, just like the alcoholic parent, the absentee parent, the narcissistic parent, these all set different sort of ripples in the direction of our adulthood. But there are papers out there in research that talk about trauma through omission. So not the parent that was constantly on you, telling you you were worthless, or the parent that was constantly beating you, but the parent that just wasn't around.
Wow.
Either they weren't around physically, right? And for any of us that sort of grew up with a parent that wasn't around, we know the implications of that, right? I had known this from the research for years studying it, but it wasn't until I had my son that I saw how absolutely critical it is for the healthy development of a child to have both a mothering, nurturing figure and a sort of father, or there's like research about how they need to rough and tumble, how the father teaches certain things that the mother can't teach, and vice versa. So when one of those elements is not present for us, often what it may even do, like here's one implication. I know a lot of single parents who felt that they had to sort of make up for the parent that wasn't there. So, extra pressure, extra, a lot of things there. So, individually that might've looked differently for us having the absentee parent, could be that absentee parent was super toxic and maybe didn't need to be in the home, but like, did you know that as a child? What I often talk about, Sandra, is like, what is the impression that we sort of took away from our childhood, right? It's about the child or adult's perception. Because here's an example I'll give. I walked away from my childhood feeling very isolated and alone. Now, you ask my mother or father, well, my father's passed, but they'll tell you, what are you talking about? We were there every day. But they weren't there because they were too self-involved with a dysfunctional marriage. My dad at times with his drinking or work. My mom with, whatever my mom was dealing with. My brother wasn't a brotherly figure. He was dealing with his own stuff, right? So I felt very isolated. I felt growing up that no one understood me, that no one got me, that no one was really attending or tuned into what I was needing to help me grow up. So my perception of my childhood, although there were people physically present, was that there was a sense of abandonment there. Now, no one was trying to abandon me, but that's what it felt like. I have to honor that that's my truth. So again, with the absentee parent, I would sit and ask the person, like, how did that feel for you? What do you imagine came from that? Maybe a part of us felt like, I wasn't loved or I wasn't appreciated. I don't know. I think it's important to not, we're having these sort of general conversations, but at the end of the day, it's like, what did you as the human individual experience? Because that's valid and important, and that matters.
And what is it about us? I mean, I've seen too many episodes of Oprah back in the day to not know that everybody says if they've had something in their childhood that they weren't happy about, oh, when I have kids, I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to do that. Yeah. And yet, in most instances, we end up repeating the exact same patterns. That is trying to break these generational imprints, now that we know properly what it's called. Why is that so hard? Is it because you only know what you've been exposed to? I mean, that's my rudimentary explanation for it. When I see things, I go, that's because if that's all you're exposed to in life, how do you know any different?
Yeah.
You have to consciously go to therapy, be in a different environment. And I think I got this at a very young age because I went from one type of home structure to a very different type of home structure. In some ways, one was better than the other, but in some ways there was a different type of dysfunctionality. Like I talk about the controlling element of my aunt, like that wasn't good for me, but that's all that she knew. That's the only way she knew to parent. She came from a generation where that's how you kept kids safe. They, I wasn't going to get kidnapped on her watch. She's like, you're my brother's kid. If you get kidnapped, I'm going to get blamed. So that meant that I couldn't do after school activities. I couldn't do this. She was so restrictive and so controlling. Right. Yeah. And so that's what she knew. Yeah. And so when I became an adult, even the things I held against her and I was angry about, I had to release it because I had to say, you know what? She did the best that she could do.
Yeah. Yeah. There is in this work, Sandra, a lot of acceptance and forgiveness that needs to happen. Right. For a lot of years, I was angry at my parents, but I was angry because I hadn't done my healing yet. And so I blamed them and I pointed fingers and I disempowered myself. Right. The truth is, times change. Right. Like what was good in one generation is not going to be good. Don't get me wrong. I am by no means a perfect parent. And, my wife and I talk about like how we are with our child now, we think is great, but who knows 20 years down the road? I mean, he might be in therapy in 15 years being like, do you know what it's like to live with two therapists? It's crazy in there, right? Like you have no idea how much it damaged me, right? I mean, that's possible. But, I think at the essence, it's about, can we develop awareness? Can we develop awareness of these patterns? Can we develop awareness of how I want to shift the parts of me? Because I think at our essence, and it's been said today multiple times, like we are love, right? Like that's how we came into the world, loving, compassionate human beings. We see that in children very early on. And so most of us, if not all of us, I'll dare to say, have just been conditioned and wired by both good and bad experiences throughout our lives. It's not a judgment. Like, let's release the shame of it. It was just a series of experiences that we had, and it developed into certain things. But if we want to continue to be better human beings, right? If we want to continue to live without resentment and anger and bitterness, if we, then we need to look at what are those things within us that keep that trapped. But a lot of it is programming. I mean, it wasn't until I had my son, my wife sort of lets my son get dirty, and when he's eating, the food can be in his hair, all over his clothes, all over the counter. The other day we were having dinner, and my son started playing with the fork he was eating with and the water, right? To which I had this immediate response. I was like, Jonah, that's for eating, right? Like, just, that wasn't like traumatic or extreme. I didn't get angry. But my son stops and he looks at me, he goes, Daddy, are you sad? And I was like, oh my God, what is he experiencing right now? I was like, no, buddy, I'm not sad. He goes, are you disappointed? To which I look over at my wife and I'm like, what are you teaching this child while I'm gone all day working?
Yes.
So mama comes over and she's like, Jonah, Daddy grew up with a lot of rules at the dinner table. That's not about you. And she wasn't wrong, right? My irritability around cleanliness and dirtiness came from my upbringing. So one of the things I always find myself doing, Sandy, with my son is if his mouth is dirty, I'm like chasing him with a napkin trying to clean his mouth. That's my mother. That's my mother. I never thought I would do something like that. And that's my mom showing up in me as a parent, right? So some of these things we just can't avoid. How do we bring intention and mindfulness every day to our behaviors, to our actions, to our feelings, just to witness them and to see where can I shift a little bit in the service of becoming a better human being?
Wow. So interesting. 936-2626. We're going to start to wind up a little bit here. It's 20 minutes to 10, which is 20 minutes to 11 for good Dr. Garcia. And he does have some other commitments, but what an amazing show this has been. I'll tell you, the time has gone by so quickly because our radio element ends at 9:30 and I didn't even realize what time it was. But thank you so much, Cindy, for that question. Urban Thread says expectations of society is what is hurting families. No work-life balance, always rushing every day to and from school and work. No good night's sleep because there's always a rush to leave home on time, and no help from the village. This is a life of many Caymanians, but not just Caymanians. I tell you, all over the world, we're struggling with work-life balance. We have, grandparents are no longer part of the support network for families anymore. There was a time when grandparents were there. Children saw them every day. They were living in the same households. They were helping to raise children. In some cultures, I suppose that some of that still exists. But, when you chase the American dream, the Caymanian dream, whatever, of prosperity and, the 4,000 square foot house and the fancy car and all these sorts of things, you give up a lot for those things, I feel like, as well. So the balance has to be there. Bertha, good morning, ma'am. She says that's really a shame. Instead of answering the questions a child asks, the parent is perhaps challenged by it or think the child is rude and tells the child to stay in a child's place or something like that. I've actually experienced that because, again, I don't think my husband was trying to be rude or he hadn't really thought about it, but he was like, in the Caribbean, we have the saying, don't speak unless you're spoken to. And I said, no. Once she's being respectful, yes, ma'am, no, sir, whatever, there's no question that's off limits to my daughter. I'm like, ask away. Sometimes they forget even with their manners and you just say, yes, ma'am. And you remind them, but they interrupt because they're curious, like you said, and they want to know something. So Bertha, I agree. We need to stop telling children because essentially what you're telling them at a very, very early age is your voice doesn't matter. And that's not good. That's why they keep things from us when they need to speak out, when they're being abused, when they're being bullied. Sometimes we're the last to know because we have inadvertently silenced our children. Don't speak until you're spoken to.
Yeah.
No, if something happened to you, listen. I had an episode 2 days ago where my daughter said, I picked her up from school and I tried to encourage her to talk about her day and what happened. And we hadn't even gotten to the car yet. And she shared a story of, oh, Mom, I think I hurt so-and-so's feelings. And I said, really? I said, well, what happened? And she told me the story that, at their recess, she went and played with another friend and didn't invite this particular friend over. And she cried. And she told her little brother or big brother or whatever, she told her sibling about it. And I said, wow. And I said, but you didn't mean to hurt her feelings, right? She said, no, she didn't think about it. And so I said, well, did you talk to her afterwards? I said, sometimes, even now, I hurt somebody's feelings in the moment. I didn't think about it, but you can always have the opportunity to go back and say, I'm sorry. Let me explain to you what, from my perspective, happened. I just wanted to spend some time with this friend. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but we're fine. And you're still my friend and I still love you. And, apparently she went home and talked about it, the other child. And that's how I must say that my daughter attends a school where they will talk about emotions. They encourage that. So when the child came back, they had a whole session of school in the classroom about how to play with her friends, but to do it in a way where we're not excluding other people. Because sometimes, their feelings get hurt. And so we have these moments as adults where our children, as young as they are teaching us about humanity and love and patience and friendship. So I'm just in awe. Jasara, good morning. Says, what I hate to hear is when some parents say to their kids, I brought you into this world and I will take you out. Oh my God. So Elizabeth normally listens to the program every morning. And she was telling me the other day that there is some kind of like TikTok trend or whatever, where you say to your children the things that were said to you and see how they respond. And she said that, I think with the exception of one, I can't remember which one, all of the things that she said to her kids, they didn't know what they meant. And that was a good thing. So one of them is, I brought you into this world. So you say part of it and they have to finish the rest. That's the TikTok trend. So she's like, okay, brought you into this world. And the kid's like, so I'm going to love you forever. Like they were saying stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, that is so amazing. Because you shouldn't say those things to your kids. And I haven't done it yet with my daughter, but I don't think I've ever said any of those things to her. But they were said to me. So again, we have to learn from one generation to the next and try to make some improvements. Irvlin says, I had an absentee parent at the early age of 7. Then I ran away from my dad after my mom left to live with my grandmother. My mother was the absentee parent, so my grandmother was my mom. Now, a lot of that happened, but what happens when you don't have anyone to run to? That you're stuck in that environment, in that situation. Ms. Vernita, good morning, says thank you regarding the narcissistic parent. Paul says, can we book Dr. Carlos online? Great vibes, which is hard to find. So Dr. Carlos, as we start to wind up the program here today, and please tell me now you're seeing the benefits of doing your own show on CMR TV. We need you.
I see it, my friend.
So, of course you are. Oh, we've got a phone call. Let's grab this one. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, honey.
Good morning.
Another thing. Hey, Dr. Carlos, I know your name this time.
Yes.
Yes, and I just want to say you're a realist. I listen closely, and what I love is that you didn't just go in and actually was taught in a school. You're taught by people's feelings is more what I'm getting from you. It's like, and that makes a difference. You didn't just get it out of a book. You're saying, sure, about absentee, you have to get it from somebody that went through that. And that's the best thing that you could teach somebody is experience. I say that to say this, the kids, a lot of time are having kids so young. Sandy probably don't do those things with her daughter because by now she's been through so much that she understands life. And you've been through so much by the time you were 30, the Navy and, everything. So you understood. But then when the kid get pregnant at 16 and 17, they haven't been through anything. So sometimes they don't know no better, anything else to give to this child at 16 or 17 or 18, they're young. So this is where, we as parents and neighbors and family friends, we need to help them when they have the kids, even though some of the kids don't, want help. Some of the kids are rude, but again, it comes from the environment. Environment is a big thing in everybody's life. You could take a pick of the pen, but you can't take the pen. They'll go right back some people. And you said, why he's so stupid or she's so stupid? But because that was all they knew. I found this in my own relationship very early. My husband, mother died when he was 9, and his father was not in a relationship. And that softened my heart to say, how did you survive at 9? No parents. And I look at 9 years, like my 9-year-old kids and other people, and I'm like, how? And that sort of helped me. When you did things, I would say, listen now, I'm not your mother, I'm your wife, but that's not nice, And I would say in a good way, because again, I didn't want to seem like, because I think that makes it harder for you to get through to a person by the way you say it to people. So I would say it with a laugh, a good whatever, to make him know it's coming from a good place. And I think when you're coming from a good place and it's sincere, it touches people more than you just knowing that it's wrong. And whatever, because he's grown. You should know this. Unfortunately, some people don't know it. They might not believe. And guess what? I didn't do like Sadna say, sometimes you got to be on the same level. Well, I choose my battle. And again, I have my kids, so I decide I am not going to leave and go somewhere else to pick up another one to train or whatever. And I want to make sure my daughter is safe, my daughters, because to me, that was very important to me. You pick up men that will molest your kids and all of these things. So you're hoping the best with your husband that, that will never be. So I was like, I'll stick it out, and so forth, because he's rightfully my daughter's father and my son, and I'll stick it out. But everybody can't stick it out, because some people is abusive. Thank God he was never abusive in that way, because that's one thing I hate is abusive person, And so it's a lot of times this is a problem. You only can do what you really know. And even in jobs, you find some people, they act like they're in a house, in their own homes. And I have to remind them, you work in an establishment, darling. You here at government's desk. I'm not at your house. I'm not being rude, but you're at work. I came here to get a solution, not your attitude. And so it goes not just in the home. They take it out in the workplaces. They take it out in society. That's why they do these things. They burn people's cars, they whatever, because they feel like this person didn't listen or this person whatever. And we have it. So it starts from the house and it spread right through the whole world.
Thank you, Miss Joyce. I appreciate it.
Yes, honey. Thank you.
All right, my dear. Thank you so much.
Okay, honey.
Caller says those are some very good points that she was making. Caller, you can also be single. That's an option. Maybe we should talk about that one day. How single or divorced parents navigate new relationships. Is it better to just stay single and they're sacrificing their happiness? Because there are some people who are not happy being single. They need companionship. They need help, parenting help. I mean, despite the fact that, and I think that this is, I'm kind of torn on how I'm going to say this, but there is a little bit of a fallacy, Dr. Garcia, that we can raise perfectly, maybe this isn't how I want to say, but there is a fallacy that the households are the same when it's a single parent household versus a 2-parent household. Now, that doesn't mean that single parents don't do an amazing job and they don't raise wonderful children. But a 2-parent household matters because these kids are smart. Sometimes you've got to tag team them. You know what I mean? And they need the balance of having different personality types, I feel like, too. The different parental roles in the household. And they know who the weaker person is. I've seen it. They're going to test the boundaries. They go to the weaker parent after the other parent said no to something. And, I always thought for myself that I was going to be, again, partly because of how my aunt was, I was going to be the strict parent, everything by the book. And lo and behold, it turns out that I'm a little bit of a softie. She's an only child. So I'm very, very careful with the only child syndrome and overindulging her and giving her everything she wants. And so sometimes she asks for something and I say, no, I can't afford that. And that's not entirely true. I can't afford it, but it wasn't in my budget. I wasn't planning to buy it. So therefore I can't afford it. And I try to put in her brain little things like about budgeting and note, we came to the store just for this. So today we're not going to deviate from that. But I have to consciously force myself to be that way because the parent in me, the natural parent in me wants to just give her whatever she wants. It's like, yeah, you can have this, you can have this. And I'm like, nope. Say no. Learn to say no as a parent. But, again, that's a whole other show. The fallacy of single parenthood being the perfect combination for children.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up, but here's a good one. Can he possibly provide sources for doing shadow work? Well, explain to us, what is shadow work?
Yeah. So, part of what we've been talking about today is that, whatever our life experience has been, we're all going to face adversity. That's part of the human experience. None of us are immune. None of us get to avoid it. So whether it's in childhood, teenage years, early adolescence, adulthood, we're all going to face adversity. And when we face that adversity, but don't navigate the adversity in what I would say healthier ways, some of that gets trapped in the unconscious, right? So the shadow work is going into those dark places within ourselves, going into the pain, going into the places where our unconscious holds a lot of pain and shame and those dark aspects of ourselves that we often don't want to look at. Shadow work is about bringing our darkness into the light so it can be revealed, so we can work on it, so we can better ourselves. And so it's sort of like a trendy term here in the last 5 years or so, but it essentially refers to doing the inner work.
Okay.
And to sort of answer that, I think start where you are, right? Like today's conversation seemed to have been a nugget of insight for everybody. Start there, pull on that thread, see what you find, read a book, reach out, ask these questions, right? Because every step will lead you to your next moment of healing.
I love that.
And for the audience members listening out there, I know somebody asked about booking me online earlier. I'm actually in the middle of a transition process where I'm seeing less clients sort of day-to-day one-on-one because my passion is now to get out and have these conversations around the world, get on some stages, bring the magic and beauty of therapy out from behind the one-on-one private hidden environment and bring it to the world. So if folks want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I often do post a lot of how do we do shadow work? How do we navigate our shame? A lot of messages of can we just honor that we're messy adults and messy humans sometimes and give ourselves some grace? That's really what we ultimately need, is to stop being so darn hard on ourselves and give ourselves a little permission to be human, to be messy.
Yeah.
So, if folks want to follow me there, Dr. Carlos A. Garcia, I post a lot of content. That's probably the best way to stay connected and ask, you could always drop me a direct message, ask for book recommendations and things like that. Always happy to help.
Very good. All right. This person goes on, says, for me, my parents compared me a lot to others and it destroyed me finding my true identity. My love, attention, acceptance has to come from others. I had to have accolades in order to be loved. I had to be in a constant path of serving others in order to be loved and accepted. Wow, that's a lot of pressure. Yeah. I totally feel all this to my soul. I have 2 sons, so hearing this is working on me so I can be better to my son. Sandy, I'm shaking. This man is speaking directly to my soul. Yes, Dr. Carlos speaks to us, honey. Please go into overtime. And so, of course, we can't go into overtime because Dr. Carlos has a hard stop here in 3 minutes. So we're going to be respectful of his time, but it shows you what a hit you were. Zoe says Dr. Garcia is a very good communicator. And Urban Thread says, come to the Cayman Islands, Dr. Carlos. So you've got an invite already. Look at that.
I love it. I'm coming down. Listen, I need a vacation. We'll do a little work. We'll have some conversations. We'll do some stuff. It'll be great.
Yeah. Absolutely. We can make it happen. So let us take this moment now to say a big thank you to Dr. Carlos. We want to thank you so much for joining us in today's segment of The Cold Hard Truth. Your insight into men's mental health, cultural stigmas, emotional challenges faced by so many of us, especially in our Caribbean context, was not only eye-opening, but incredibly timely. Folks, I'm hoping that this is just the beginning. Mental wellness is a conversation that we need to keep having. It's not really a once a week conversation. It's not even a once a month conversation. It's a continual conversation. How do we become more compassionate? What no nonsense approaches that we need to be having when it talks to addressing mental health in our community, and we're here for it. I specifically wanted at least one, if not more, mental health programs on our CMR TV lineup, and we're hoping that this will be a regular segment of some sort. We'll work out the logistics, but this is certainly an open invitation to join the CMR family to Dr. Carlos for a recurring segment as we continue breaking the silence, shifting perspectives, and supporting mental health across our 3-island nation. Folks, it begins with dialogue. It begins with not being afraid to talk and to open up. Damien says, thank you, Dr. Carlos. This was a very insightful segment. Miss Mona says, thank you very much for this knowledge. And all of us, we still had close to 400 people saying thank you. Now, I did make an observation. Someone said, if we were talking about some gossipy sis or somebody fighting, we'd probably have 1,000 people on here. I get it, but we're going to clip out this segment. Somebody made the recommendation. They said, clip this segment. This is episode number 1 for Dr. Carlos. We will definitely clip this segment and put that up. So many questions that we didn't get to. One, Aisle 25 says, can we do a show on teen parenting? Somebody else was asking, can we do a show on, oh gosh, let me see what that one was again. My apologies. So many were coming in. Oh yes, on losing a child at a very young, losing a parent unexpectedly at a young age. This person says, often your parenting takes away from a child to think and problem solve for themselves. So many show topics that have been formulated. And Dr. Carlos, we appreciate you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for all of the beautiful work that you're doing, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend. All right, folks. So yeah, that's how we do it. Now, I'm also going to go because I've got a full day of interviews and stuff lined up as well. But that was a fantastic show with Dr. Carlos. Anne says, thank you for speaking to us in layman's English as well. And Irvlyn and Jasara and many others thanking Dr. Carlos. Can we have him as a nighttime show? Why not? I think that's a great idea. You can call in the evenings. I have zero problems with that. There's going to be a lot of nighttime shows. Everybody wants that like 7 p.m. segment. We'll work it out, Damien. Don't worry. We're on it, honey child. And happy Father's Day this weekend. We forgot to tell that to Dr. Carlos. Yes, happy Father's Day to all of the amazing fathers. Sunday is your day to be celebrated. We'll do a little something around here for Dad for sure. This is, conversations. That's where it starts. And not being afraid of conversations, not being afraid of our feelings, not being afraid of being honest, not being afraid of our vulnerabilities. This is us. Okay? Yeah. Thank you guys so much. You were amazing today. Some great calls, some great questions from all of you. Everybody gets an A today. Awesome. See you guys on Monday, hopefully. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Cold Hard Truth. on Bobo 89.1 FM. Cayman's #1 talk show is live weekdays from 7:30 a.m. Never miss an episode again. Watch anytime on CMR's Facebook and YouTube channels for the latest show episodes. Don't forget to follow us online on our social media channels. And visit CaymanMarlRoad.com for all the latest news and community happenings.